Hello and what is up YouTube? My name is G3Iron and in today's video we are back in the classroom for POE Business 103 where we are learning to craft for profit. Today we are focusing on crafting and creating items that are otherwise confusing to make. This means that there are less people making them and ensures that we will make more profit. If you are new here to the community, you can go ahead and like, subscribe, and ding the bell to be notified about future video discussions just like this one. And if you're a veteran of the channel, then welcome back. You know the way how things work around here. Down below in the video description are some timestamps as well as some resources for you to be able to interact with if any of the discussion points that we talk about today are of interest to you. In our POE crafting series thus far, we have focused in on 3 rules of profit to help guide our crafting, always ensure that we make as much profit as possible. These are some general rules and guidelines that help steer exactly how we make decisions when we are choosing what to craft and how to sell it. The first rule of profit was that we wanted to sell items at a greater value than at the cost of creation. Thus, we are ensuring that we are creating things that we can sell for profit. Secondly, we wanted to create items that are appealing to a broad audience. This ensured that the items that we created would sell quickly to give us currency back to then move into future markets. Both of these rules of profit have got their own episodes that are featured and links down below in the video description. And today we are focusing in on our third rule of profit, which is that we want to create items that are confusing to make. By crafting items that are confusing to make ourselves, we ensure that there are fewer competitors making these items, which means that we will ensure profit because we are having a sale point that is higher than at the point of cost creation. It is relatively appealing to a broad audience, and because it's confusing to make, there won't be that many other people involved in the market when we get into that particular crafting market ourselves. So in order to create items that are confusing to make, we need to understand how profit interacts with confusion in Path of Exile. So we have come up with our confuse-o-meter that is showing that there are steps along the way when we are making more confusing items or interacting with more confusing crafts. Now, when I say something is confusing, today what I'm simply meaning by that is that something has more steps to accomplish a craft than what would otherwise be acceptable. This is essentially gauging the resistance of a particular crafter to interacting with a particular type of craft because there are more steps involved. In general, the more steps are involved in making a particular craft, the higher potential for profit there is because there are fewer and fewer people who are able to achieve those sorts of ends with their crafting profit. So, if you are willing to take the steps needed to go through a long chain of events to create some top-tier items, you will reap the profits of being in a market that is highly desirable. You're selling something at a greater margin than what it cost you to produce, and there aren't many other people competing with you crafting in those same markets. Therefore, you don't have to worry about other people trying to come in and undercut your price or even price fixing your crafts in order to get you to lower your price margin on the item that you have crafted in the price point that you are willing to sell at. One disclaimer on this. Please remember that these are general guidelines. These are not specific guidelines to any one particular craft. We will take a look at one particular example later on in our discussion today, but in general, we're talking about some broad principles that will help you be able to apply those principles in whatever trade league it is that you are crafting for profit. Now, on our confuse-o-meter, you'll notice that there are some green arrows displaying essentially upticks, right? These upticks are indicators that show when your crafting is going to result in a positive profit margin for your end version of your craft. Every time you make a decision on crafting something that increases the value, the sale price of the item, that is indicated by the green arrows. There are, in this particular case, 7 green arrows indicating that there are 7 different intervals or 7 different decisions that we can make that are going to represent increase in profit in the item that we are crafting. Not every decision that we make when crafting is going to result in profit, though. This is why there are also 7 arrows representing negative potential profit. There's opportunities where we could accidentally screw up our entire craft and lose currency in the process of creating an item. This is one of the reasons why the markets that we're looking at or the crafts that we're engaging with are so dang confusing and why there won't be that many other people interacting in these particular markets. Some of you may give a little bit of pushback and say, oh, come on, it couldn't be really that confusing to do some of these crafts. Well, for some crafts, they're incredibly confusing. Other crafts that might not be as confusing to one person might be more confusing to another. This is essentially putting your knowledge in Path of Exile to the test to say whether or not you're going to be able to craft something based on the resources that you have and turn that craft into a profitable, sellable item, or if you're going to use your knowledge and throw your currency into something that ultimately isn't going to be that valuable. So just as there are opportunities when interacting with confusing crafting processes for profit, there's also opportunities for loss. Again, the amount of risk that is included in this particular representative lesson is one of the reasons why we are secured when we do create something that's a top item or desirable item, because not a lot of other people are going to be able to replicate that process. Maybe you've seen someone in your guild show off an item, or in a Discord server or on Reddit or on the forums, show off an item, and you've wondered yourself, how did they go about creating that item? What sort of process did they follow to create that item? And people who can answer those sorts of questions, to answer how it is that an item goes from a base to a highly desirable item, those people who can answer those questions know that they can navigate the confusometer successfully to take something from relatively low value and turn it into something relatively high value. That is the key in ensuring that not a lot of other people are going to be competing with you in the market for those sorts of items, because they don't have the same knowledge that you do for creating that item efficiently. Let's take a confusing example to create an item that is going to be profitable for us. This right here is what we're aiming for. We're aiming for a 6-link Astral Plate that's got 3 white sockets on it. This particular plate is very, very desirable because Astral Plates have got all elemental resistances as they're implicit. They're also an armor base, so you can use them with a wide variety of defensive setups that take advantage of things like cast when damage taken or molten shell. And because they've got 1 green socket, that's oftentimes what you're looking for when you are playing Cyclone. Cyclone is obviously a very, very popular skill at the moment in Path of Exile. And the 2 red sockets provide you with some options for supporting your Cyclone, and then the 3 white sockets allow you to mess around with any combination of red, green, or blue supports that you would like to. So this is what we're aiming for. 6-link, 3 white socket, 12% all elemental resistance Astral Plate. That in and of itself is going to be a pretty confusing craft. We'll talk about that more in just a moment. Let's say hypothetically though that this sort of Astral Plate is selling for 10 Exalted to purchase. If we're willing to combine that Astral Plate that we spent 10 Exalted on with the Fenumal Plagued Arachnid, we can create a copy where we are splitting an item. We'll have to use a Regale Orb in order to turn this particular Astral Plate into a rare version of the item. But once we do that, we have a rare version that we can take to the Menagerie using a Fenumal Plagued Arachnid to split the item. Instead of having just a single Astral Plate, we will then have 2 magic Astral Plates. Now, this isn't quite as good as using a Mirror of Calandra on something. Don't hear what I'm not saying. I'm not saying that you're creating exact copies of a top-tier rare Astral Plate. What happens through the use of the Fenumal Plagued Arachnid is you had 1 rare item that is then split with its mods into 2 magic items. So each of those magic items will have 1 stat on them each. Because we've used the Fenumal Plagued Arachnid, we then will have 2 magic Astral Plates. Let's say, for instance, that the Fenumal Plagued Arachnid cost us 2 Exalted to purchase. If we've spent 10 Exalted to purchase the Astral Plate and 2 Exalted to purchase a Fenumal Plagued Arachnid, we have spent a grand total of 12 Exalted Orbs on this initial craft. Now there's a couple of contingencies here. For instance, if you know how to make the Astral Plate on your own, let's say you can 6-link it and 3 white socket it with 2 reds and a green for much cheaper than 10 Exalted, that's more margin that you've got to work with. In other words, your crafting process will cost you less and your sale price will remain the same, meaning that you get to keep more of your hard-earned currency. However, for the sake of our example today and for our discussion, we're going to assume that we spent 10 Exalted to either purchase or craft the Astral Plate. We just want all of us to be using the same numbers, so 12x is what we're going to say the initial craft cost between the 10x Astral Plate and the 2x Fenumal Plagued Arachnid. Now, some of you are already going to give me some pushback and say, Iron, I can't even imagine having 12 Exalted to start crafting and start messing around with. That's totally fine. There are other crafts that follow similar lines of thought, similar chains, right? Representing similar steps that are required for you to craft in order to make profit. But we haven't even gotten to the profit part of this particular craft, so let's take a look at that first. So in our example, every time we buy a Fenumal Plagued Arachnid, we can then apply it to a rare version of our Astral Plate that will then split the Astral Plate. We can then sell one copy of that Astral Plate for a given price point, and then keep the other copy in order to regale it and use another Fenumal Plagued Arachnid on it. This means that our initial investment is 12 Exalted, and from there on out, the only thing that we need to purchase to keep this craft going as a continual Astral Plate printing factory is to continue buying Fenumal Plagued Arachnids and continually having a supply of regale orbs to be able to turn those magic versions of an Astral Plate into rare versions of an Astral Plate that will then be split through the menagerie craft. And this is essentially what you end up getting. You essentially get as many Astral Plates as you can purchase or farm Fenumal Plagued Arachnids. This means that as long as it's still profitable in the given market for you to be selling your Astral Plates, that you will be making currency. You will be printing currency for as many times as you can go and craft Fenumal Plagued Arachnids and then sell them as copies of that 6-link 3-white socket Astral Plate. Now again, you don't have to do this as an Astral Plate. You could do this if, let's say, the meta is revolving around spell casting. You could do this around a Volregalia chess piece. You could do this in a meta that is particularly dominated by green gems, by an evasion-based chess piece. It doesn't matter what it is, as long as you are using a Fenumal Plagued Arachnid to beast split this very highly desirable color combination and socket combination of links on a chess piece, you are going to be making profit, as long as you are able to purchase the Fenumal Plagued Arachnid for less than you are able to sell your Astral Plate. As long as you can sell your Astral Plate for more than what you are purchasing your Fenumal Plagued Arachnid, that difference is going to represent your profit margin every single time you follow through on this craft. Now, if you're confused at this point and saying, yeah, but Iron, I thought it cost us 10 Exalted to get that Astral Plate. Sure, it cost us 10 Exalted to get the first Astral Plate, but here on out, every single time we're creating a copy of it, it's only costing us 2 Exalted to make each and every copy. So if we're selling that Astral Plate at the market value of 3x, 4x, 5x, again, as long as the price point of the Fenumal Plagued Arachnid is lower than the price point on the Astral Plate, there is still margin there for you to be following a relatively confusing craft, but it is a crafting currency factory. So in our example today, we've taken a look at how to craft an Astral Plate, and there are lots of different profit points that are confusing moments that may turn several players off or away from this particular craft. The more people who get turned off by a particular craft, it generally means there are fewer people crafting it, which means there's more margin for profit there. So if you're willing to take the time to study and find these particular types of crafts where less people are involved in them, you will be guaranteed more profit because you'll be one of the few competitors that is actually reliably creating these highly desirable items at a price point that you can sell for higher than the currency cost to create. So some confusing moments that are going to add profit in this particular crafting chain. The price of the item and the level base of the Astral Plate. That's going to be, of course, gated by map progress. And early on in a league, whether that's the first day or two or week or two, again, depending on what sort of league it is, that is going to be gated and potentially very, very pricey. Secondly, 6-linking an Astral Plate requires an amount of jewelers and an amount of fusings that are going to be somewhat of an investment early on. Thirdly, in order to craft 3 white sockets and to get the desired colors on your particular base are going to cost you. Whether or not you're using fossils or betrayal crafting, it's going to cost you to get those 3 white sockets. And then fourthly, the variable price of the Fenumal Plagued Arachnids themselves. Early on in a league, you can always pick up bestiary scarabs and farm these guys yourself, or you can always have a live search going for this sort of thing, but you need to know what it is that is going to be contingent, that last step of your confusometer for really generating the maximum amount of profits in your crafting chain. Fenumal Plagued Arachnids, for instance, change in their price based on the day and based on the league. There are some leagues that this particular craft is incredibly popular. There are other leagues where almost no one is doing this craft, meaning that there's a ton of profit involved. It just depends on the time of day and the type of league we're involved in. It's not all sunny skies and Exalted drops all over the place, though. There are some dangers and some risk moments in this craft that are going to turn many players away. For instance, the price of the item level base, which is gated by map progress. The price of the 6-link Astral Plate. Many players aren't going to farm up the jewelers or risk using their fusings on this one particular craft. The price of 3 white socketing. Many players have no idea how to get white sockets onto different items. That is something that if a player has no idea how to do, then they're not going to be able to replicate this, and it's going to be a turnoff for this type of craft. Of course, the price of Fenumal Plagued Arachnids. If they're incredibly expensive, or the entire combination of this entire craft is incredibly expensive, it's going to turn players off, and that's just very, very risky. You also run the risk with Fenumal Plagued Arachnids that if you're purchasing these and then selling your Astral Plates at different points throughout the day, it could be that the Fenumal Plagued Arachnid market actually shifts at a time that is faster than the shifting in your Astral Plates, where you're actually holding on to Astral Plates that are then going to be sold for roughly the same price as Fenumal Plagued Arachnids. That is definitely a risk that you have to be aware of. Are the various amounts of items that you need, whether that's currency, whether that's recipes, are the input materials that you are using for your craft, are they still at a price point that is going to allow you to sell the completed item at a higher level, at a higher price point, thus ensuring craft? That is always a risk that is involved when going with a longer chain of crafting events in order to guarantee profit. In this case, it may not be a guarantee, it may be a high amount of risk. So here is our example problem for you all to try to work out today down below in the comments. Let's say that we've got 12 Exalted as our initial investment for purchasing an Astral Plate and a single Plagued Arachnid. It's going to cost us 2 Exalted for each additional purchase of Fenumal Plagued Arachnids. For the sake of our discussion today, we're going to say that you can sell each Astral Plate at 3 Exalted. We're not going to say that fluctuates, and we're not going to say the price of Fenumal Plagued Arachnids fluctuate. In other words, it's going to cost you 2 Exalted to print every single copy of an additional Astral Plate, and each additional copy that you print is going to sell for 3 Exalted. So the question today that I'd love to hear from you guys down below in the comments, if you can work it out, is how many sales of Astral Plates do we need to make in order to begin making profit? Remember again, we're 12 Exalted initially invested into this thing, so how many sales do we need to make before we start recouping our investment and eventually break even and then make profit? Well, thanks so much for watching. What is your answer to today's crafting question? How many sales do you need to make to begin to make profit? Drop us a comment down below with your answer. Also, what are some of the more confusing crafts that you enjoy that you would like to share with the community? Lastly, what's stopping you from getting into more confusing crafts? Is it the risk? Is it the currency? Is it the knowledge? Let us know down below in the comments. And as always, I look forward to interacting and reading each and every one of your comments down below. And I hope today is the day a Mirror of Calandra drops for you. Thanks for watching that video. If you'd like more information on any of our discussion points today, you can see them down below in the video description. If you'd also like to join our Discord or support our Patreon, you can do so with the links down below. Thanks again, and big shout out to all of our Patreon supporters.